Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition on PS4. Man, there is a lot to say here. Yet I'm not sure how much of what I have to say hasn't already been said over the years by certainly more famous video game reviewers, if not certainly better writers than myself. But damn it, I'm going to do it anyway. And this title, well, it's certainly a thing. It's been around for a long time, but I'll be reviewing the Enhanced Edition because that is what I have, and there's quite a bit more than the original title. Let's get this one rolling with 2019's Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition. Neverwinter Nights is a game set in the Forgotten Realms Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game setting, the same as the Baldur's Gate series. Yet this game is set in the decades between Baldur's Gates 1 and 2 and its creaking, aging 2nd edition AD&D rules set, party-based hack and slash story, and Baldur's Gate 3 and its use of the 5th edition rules set, party-based orgy with occasional goblin slaying thrown in so people can actually play the fucking thing. And it is not just having Divinity Original Sin 2 Horny Edition for the shippers out there. Neverwinter Nights is solidly 3rd edition D&D. Tables and tables atop tables and tables, rules upon rules. 3rd edition and 3.5 edition, which I played through and lived through, were an accountant student's wet dream. With all the math and practicality that no amount of imagination or bad fantasy tropes and even worse jokes could gloss over the fact that you were absolutely sat in someone's dorm room or middle-class condo dining room, staring at dice and battle mats and figurines, wasting away to Saturday night, wondering if it wouldn't be better to get drunk at a bar while getting turned down by every woman in the place, or simply swan diving off of the nearest highway overpass in front of an 18-wheeler. Yes, it's that bad. The only reason Dungeons & Dragons survived the early to middle 2000s is because it had been bought out by its competitor, Wizards of the Coast, whose Magic the Gathering trading card game was raking in fucking millions, and was enough to float its flagging world's greatest role-playing game. That would worsen when Wizards made the D&D team create the 4th edition rules to mimic World of Warcraft when it was at its peak of cultural recognition or frankly anyone at all giving a shit about it. But like I said, Neverwinter Nights is stuck. Lest we all forget, Neverwinter Nights is also a BioWare game, the laziest, most half-assed of the lot, not counting their most recent efforts. All the things BioWare did with Neverwinter Nights they would immediately repeat, but so much for the better with Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, Dragon Age Origins, and Mass Effect, at least the first games in those latter two series. So BioWare did manage to take a giant shit in their own catalog way back in 2002 when the original game was released. But quite frankly, as Neverwinter Nights was a 3D dungeon crawler, the novelty carried it through and people tried to forget how bad it actually was. So what was Neverwinter Nights about and who was it for? Well, this is where we begin to have problems. The basic game, the original campaign, is an 80-hour tech demo for dungeon masters and players aspiring to that gaming title, with which it will absolutely show you how a 3-act structure works and the basics of how to put together an actual D&D game, especially under 3rd edition rules. But it is not a game. Sure, there are elements of it there, but it is hardly what we as players have come to expect as an actual fucking video game. It was also supposed to be a multiplayer game, but we'll get to that. You could go ahead and make a character, any character you want. You'll be fiddling with rules and more goddamn rules. What the game will allow you to combine and what it is forbidden because playtesters found some combinations were too powerful or too annoying for a bunch of human players sitting around a table to tolerate. Dwarven cleric, human fighter, elven wizard, it doesn't fucking matter. You will be all alone throughout this game if you play the game's single-player campaign style, as this game was also designed completely around local online multiplayer, and now online multiplayer in the better online world. However, if you don't feel like doing that or simply can't, fuck you, because you get nothing. And single player is what I can do. You can sort of make a party if you adopt one of the generic NPCs sitting around town looking for something to do while the city burns down around them, and get a summonable animal companion. Then you can sort of get a whiff of the party-based game that you can get live or with other gamers in this expansive Dungeons & Dragons video game universe. But let's be honest, this is a dungeon crawler. Your job is slaying monsters and looting treasure chests. You'll need a thief to help you with that if you don't want to die repeatedly and needlessly mean deaths, because that's what BioWare had to do, because Wizards of the Coast was footing the bill, and they were going to follow the rules to the fucking letter if they wanted their paychecks on time. And if you don't want to play the thief or smash things open with a hammer all 80 hours long, you'll be stuck with one dude, Tommy Undergallows, the archetype of annoying ass hobbit with the serial numbers filed off thief. Tommy is, and I cannot stress this enough, wet cardboard in digital form. He's the guy who only shows up every other week or so to the games, is mostly scrolling on his phone, and is there because his other plans for the weekend fell through, and he shouts generic lines and bullshit ideas until everyone is sick of the guy and they kick him out. But you, the player, are stuck with him, or you lose out on fully half of the gameplay. But what is the main game about? Regardless of what you make, you will absolutely be the latest graduate of an adventurous school here in the city of Neverwinter, one of the many thematic cities splashed around the Forgotten Realms like cancerous growths. You're at your graduation day, and you can take a sort of final exam for your class: thief, wizard, fighter, cleric. You can play through the finals of that class, you are not, but the game will tell you that you do not need to do this, and it's of no use to you. But of course, at graduation, you are attacked by hordes of goblins and enemy wizards who cause chaos across the town because the guild is holding 4 special creatures who are being researched in order to reverse the current curse/disease called the Wailing Death, ravaging the townsfolk, and they let the creatures loose. So your job becomes going to every fuck district in town, each one having a theme, and recover these critters, usually by killing them. One is pirates, one is escaped convicts, one is the undead, one I couldn't be arsed to remember. You and Tommy, repeating the same problem until you solve the issue. Opening chests with very little value, and whatever character you made, I hope you chose sword as your main weapon, because otherwise the loot tables are randomly generated, and it's likely, if you picked anything other than sword, that you're going to be underpowered very quickly, as the monsters in the power scaling bell curve surge violently upward in difficulty. And this is only the first 20 hours of the goddamn game. Once completed, you are fully released into the world, and finally, it begins to look a lot more like the BioWare catalog of game, with choices and weird scenarios, and something actually memorable, if it weren't for the lizard people plot. Oh yeah, did I forget to mention the whole 80-hour plot revolves around an ancient race of lizard people who were banished to the shadows, trying to come back and rule the world? Yeah, this whole plot is that of the Mass Effect Reapers, which BioWare would recycle in 2007. Yet here it is, the prototype, in 2002. The remaining 60 hours of the game, the second and third act of Neverwinter Nights, is you and Tommy questing across the countryside, peeking into every cave, ruin, and bodice along the Sword Coast, chasing a lizard people conspiracy theory until success. Yeah, this shit absolutely works as a home D&D game, and there's a lot to learn. If you can get past the endless loop of automated attacks and monsters, Tommy's "consider it done, guv'nah" faux British accent, and endlessly repeated lines, drop-down menus upon drop-down menus that are bordering on the obtuse to navigate, and the fact that all the dialogue, one of the hallmarks of the BioWare experience, is relegated to a tiny window in the upper one-fifth of the screen, small enough where squinting is just the expression you will adopt. But otherwise, as video game, this is just awful. Just boredom personified. And were it the whole game, this base presentation, then this title would in fact be utterly forgettable. There are reasons that this game fails to enter the pantheon of role-playing game classics. Yet, that is not really where the story ends. Neverwinter Nights was a demo of potential, a toolbox for those seeking to use the game for more. And more is, in fact, what this game got. BioWare released 2 official content packs for this game, titled Shadows of Undrentide and Hordes of the Underdark. And it is in these 2 games, that are essentially DLC, where the real brilliance of Neverwinter Nights shows through. These 2, who you can play independently but function better when played back to back, include an actual plot, voiced characters, and for most players is where the actual good memories about Neverwinter Nights are held. DLC. Who would have thought? And why did they have to be the case? Because Wizards of the Coast were paying to showcase their 3rd edition rules, and they were going to get their fucking video game out of this come hell or high water. Once the sea suits had been satisfied, then the BioWare team were allowed to create. In those 2 content packs, you go from a student of a small adventuring company to recovering lost relics from a dragon cultist and defeating slavers on your way to defeat the Lords of Shadow, to traveling a vast underground world of the fabled Dark Elves, known as the Underdark, and defeating evil priestesses and breaking a mad wizard out of his own prison of Undermountain, to delving into the depths of hell itself to save the world. Sound way more interesting than exploring goofy fuck city districts and looking for lizard people conspiracy, doesn't it? And with the benefits of hindsight, BioWare did it better with the Reapers anyway, and the Sith, and the Grey Wardens, and the Blight. I'm seeing a pattern here. Yet, did you notice I said official content packs? That's because that's not really the case. As the Aurora engine that the game was built on got older, the team was told that as long as they didn't make a D&D game, they could make whatever they liked. So they did. In Neverwinter Nights Kingmaker, a generic fantasy setting that contains amazing writing and garnered more traction for this aging game and its engine in 2004 than the creators, or Wizards of the Coast, expected. Kingmaker includes 3 modules itself: Kingmaker, Shadowguard, and Witch's Wake. Can you imagine still releasing quality content for a game 2 years after its release in 2002 without season passes or roadmaps? It's like companies knew what they were doing. At this time, Wizards asked BioWare to release more official D&D content for Neverwinter Nights, and they did, 4 more times. With the release of Pirates of the Sword Coast, Infinite Dungeons, Darkness over Daggerford, and lastly, Werven Crown of Cormyr in 2006, perhaps the greatest fucking jousting simulator known to man, when finally its sequel, Neverwinter Nights 2, was released with Obsidian at the helm of that game. Neverwinter Nights, if you buy the Enhanced Edition, is essentially 10 role-playing games in one. And if you stopped it at that god-awful base game, then you will absolutely lose out on one of the best content packs available in the modern day. But then again, it may not be worth it, the frustration, to get there because the goddamn rules system and menu upon menu that interrupts the flow of play. And here's the deal, dear listeners. Every single content pack I have just listed was included in the 2019 re-release of Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition by Beamdog, along with a bunch of compatibility patches and bug fixes, as well as smooth over graphics. So this collection is the definitive collection, and quite frankly exposes the night and day comparisons between what existed under the direction of a by-the-book, rules-as-written DM, and one who understands the spirit of the game and just goes ahead and does whatever the fuck they want anyway. And can you guess which of those 2 was better? Hint, it's not the kind of game that gets those accounting students all hot and bothered. Whew. Even in the short form, that's a lot to cover and parse quickly. Critics gave Neverwinter Nights a generally well-received return of their opinions. It's about 91 out of 100 on Metacritic, yet Neverwinter Nights fails to find itself in the same pantheon as Baldur's Gate or Planescape Torment, or hell, even Icewind Dale, let alone BioWare's own Knights of the Old Republic or Mass Effect, let alone other games like Skyrim or Fallout New Vegas or Pillars of Eternity or Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura. I refuse to let that last game disappear from the role-playing game discourse. Was it just the massive problem that the base game presented and that the game doesn't get good until you paid premium prices to get premium content that had no direct connection to the base game? Maybe, I don't know. But we do know this is hardly a game that gets mentioned in the greater gaming world. But where does this leave us? Who is Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition for? In his own review of the game from 5 years ago, YouTube game reviewer and writer Noah Gervais wrote what I feel may be the best line regarding not only this game, but what it is like to be the person who routinely runs tabletop games and adventures for friends and players around the world. It is a quote I keep close to my own heart, a stinging reminder of the frivolousness of this hobby, no matter how beloved it may be by however many people out there that are playing it. The quote goes like this: "Some of the best fantasy stories ever written could be the ones sitting half-finished in spiral ring notebooks stuffed in the backs of drawers of desks the world over. But we'll never know." That quote is what Neverwinter Nights is in game form. A half-finished idea stuffed away, barely remembered. It's the kind of game you sort of think about after years and kind of go, yeah, I'd play that again. But you forgot it was the DLC that was the good memories, not the rules and the miniatures and the colorful plastic dice spread out on the table. It's the imagination. It's the kind of story that you discover after a decade or more when you used to have time and freedom and regularly ran a Friday night game for soda and pretzels or beer and pizza with your friends. But then you got a job and met your eventual wife or husband. Then you got promoted and you had 2 kids now and a third one on the way, and you know they're going to be expensive. The mortgage rate keeps you tied to the beck and call of your boss, and you might have to put a new roof on the house. When you discover that old spiral ring notebook in that old drawer and you read through it, wistful at the memories, you wish you'd actually done something with this, man. Maybe it could have been something. A book or a movie. Maybe you get the old gang back together after all. But then you remember John hasn't really been available since he got that manager job and has a kid of his own, and Rachel has her own wedding coming up, and Stuart never did move back after he got out of the service like he said he would, and Friday just doesn't work for anybody anymore, and these fucking work emails just won't stop. And you end up throwing that spiral-bound notebook away, and that's where the whole thing ends. At least for the majority of people, that would be the end of the story. And that really is what Neverwinter Nights is. It is a creation engine for people and gaming groups that no longer have the time anymore to hang out and play a game. And from what I understand, as I'm not an MMO player, that's the same reason guilds are popular in popular titles fall apart. No one has time for this bullshit anymore, especially when you have an hour or two a week to play. Sure, you can try and rekindle it with new people, other players or groups, and maybe you'd get lucky. I know I did. But for the most part, the magic spell of these sorts of games is broken. And when the single player experience is weak, it dooms the whole thing. Now, I'm not saying that at the end of it all, Neverwinter Nights is as bad as games go. It is a unique title among the middle years of role-playing games. It is the reason we got so many 3D, more realistic role-playing games in the mid-2000s leading into the modern day. But it is also the reason so many companies retreated back to more isometric style games for role-playing games. It is the games that came before it that are the reason there are deep dialogue options and multiple choices, few of which were even the quote-unquote correct choice. This game is an anomaly, a weird appendage trying to take advantage of new technology, but it sacrifices way too much from a studio whose whole concept was deep role-playing quote options, at least at one time, and likely that period will not return, no matter what they are currently working on, because a lot of folks responsible for that sort of game are long gone from the studio or the industry itself. The magic, as I have said, has been broken. And if we get lucky, then that in and of itself is another anomaly. This is a title that is really only good despite its base game. It was a tech demo that became so much more because the studio learned what the engine could do and did that, instead of just doing whatever the corporate office said to do. It is not BioWare's fault. Halfway through the original development of the game, Wizards forced BioWare to scrap the plot of the game, and BioWare had to scramble to do something about this title. So outside corporate interference fucked up what may have been a much better game. Wizards, supposedly as rumor goes, was so difficult to work with that BioWare stopped developing licensed D&D games for them and instead took the game's original idea and made Dragon Age Origins. Yet somehow BioWare would roll over and play dead again years later when EA said they were to develop a shooter because shooters are popular. So rein in your sympathy for the poor little studio. So what would have an actual licensed game using this engine might have been like for Neverwinter Nights? Well, as Mr. Gervais said, we'll never know. But if you do have a hole in your role-playing schedule and do want to give this a try and can deal with the easier than second edition, but more rules-heavy and technically demanding, and to be dead honest with you, boring in the same way that reading through entire minutiae of the average business court legal proceedings is boring third edition rules of Dungeons & Dragons, that such games can be, then give this a try. Just get it to be able to try out the content packs, where the real meat of the game is. Also, bring your +3 axe to chop through all those submenus. Otherwise, you'll go nowhere fast. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, Orden Wells, and Mass Lama for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.